Have you ever met someone and immediately felt like something was off? You couldn't explain it. They were smiling. They were being polite. They were saying all the right things, but something about the interaction didn't feel right. Or maybe you've met someone who seemed incredibly confident at first, only to realize later that their confidence was mostly an act. And then there's the opposite. Someone who barely speaks. Someone who doesn't try to impress anyone. But somehow, after spending a few minutes with them, you feel like you understand exactly who they are. How do people do this? How can some people seem almost impossible to read, while others reveal themselves without saying very much at all? The answer isn't magic, and it isn't about learning a secret trick that lets you read someone's mind. Psychologists don't look at one gesture and immediately decide what someone is thinking. They look for something much more powerful: patterns. Because one behavior can mean almost anything. But repeated behavior, especially across different situations, can reveal a lot. So if you want to understand people better, stop looking for a single clue. Start looking for patterns. Here are some of the most useful ones. 1. Watch what changes. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to understand someone is focusing on what the person is doing. Instead, pay attention to what changes. Imagine someone is normally relaxed around you. They speak naturally, they joke, they maintain comfortable eye contact. Then suddenly, one particular subject comes up, and everything changes. Their voice becomes shorter. Their answers become vague. They suddenly want to change the subject. That doesn't automatically mean they're lying. They could be embarrassed, uncomfortable, anxious, or simply private. But the change itself is information. This is why psychologists pay attention to someone's baseline behavior. You can't understand a deviation unless you know what normal looks like for that person. Someone avoiding eye contact might simply be shy. But if someone normally looks directly at you and suddenly avoids your gaze during one particular conversation, that's worth noticing. Not as proof, as a clue. The question isn't, what does this behavior mean? The better question is, why did their behavior change right now? 2. Listen to what they don't say. People reveal themselves through their words, but they also reveal themselves through what they consistently avoid. Think about a conversation with someone you've just met. You ask them about their work, they become enthusiastic. You ask about their hobbies, they open up. You ask about their relationships, and suddenly the conversation moves somewhere else. Again, this doesn't prove anything. People have private subjects, but repeated avoidance can tell you where someone's emotional boundaries are. Sometimes the things people avoid are more revealing than the things they openly discuss. A person might talk endlessly about their achievements, but never talk about their failures. They might constantly describe how other people treated them, but rarely discuss their own behavior. They might tell you what everyone else did wrong, but almost never admit what they could have done differently. And that brings us to something incredibly important. 3. Listen to how they talk about other people. If you want to understand someone's character, listen carefully when they talk about people who aren't present. Because when there is nothing to gain from being kind, people often reveal more about their worldview. How do they describe former friends, former partners, coworkers, family members? Do they describe everyone as stupid, jealous, crazy, or incompetent? Or can they recognize that other people are complicated human beings? This doesn't mean someone is bad because they complain. Everyone complains. The pattern is what matters. If someone tells you that every single person they've ever known betrayed them, eventually you have to wonder about the pattern. Not because they're necessarily lying, but because relationships are rarely that simple. And there's another detail worth noticing. Does someone talk about people with respect even when those people aren't useful to them? That's often more revealing than how charming they are when you're the person they want something from. 4. Watch how they handle no. Here's one of the fastest ways to learn about someone's personality. Tell them no. Not aggressively, not dramatically. Just calmly say, "No, I can't do that." Then watch what happens. A psychologically healthy person might be disappointed, they might ask why, but eventually they can accept your answer. Someone who struggles with boundaries may react differently. They might pressure you, make you feel guilty, become suddenly cold, mock your decision, or keep asking until you finally give in. And that's important information because people reveal a lot about themselves when they don't get what they want. You learn how they handle frustration, you learn whether they respect boundaries, and you learn whether they see your decisions as belonging to you or as obstacles standing between them and what they want. So if you want to understand someone quickly, don't only watch how they treat you when you agree with them. Watch how they treat you when you don't. 5. Compare their words with their actions. This may be the simplest rule in the entire video. Don't just listen to what people say. Watch what repeatedly happens. Someone tells you they value honesty. Do they tell the truth when lying would benefit them? Someone says they care about your feelings. Do they change their behavior when they discover something hurts you? Someone says they're reliable. Are they actually there when you need them? Words are easy. Actions cost something. And this doesn't mean you should become cynical. People contradict themselves sometimes. People forget. People make mistakes. The important word is repeatedly. If someone's words and behavior consistently tell two different stories, the behavior deserves more attention, because people can carefully manage what they say. But maintaining a false image through hundreds of actions becomes much harder. 6. Watch what happens when nobody important is watching. Here's another powerful clue. How does someone behave when there is nothing to gain? Imagine you're in a restaurant. The person you're with is incredibly polite to you. But the moment the waiter makes a mistake, their entire personality changes. They become rude, dismissive, humiliating. Now imagine someone who treats everyone with basic respect, regardless of their social status. The cashier, the cleaner, the receptionist, the stranger, the person who can't do anything for them. Those moments can reveal something important, because when there's no audience to impress, people have less reason to perform. And sometimes the most revealing moments happen when nobody thinks they're being evaluated. 7. Pay attention to what makes them defensive. Everyone becomes defensive sometimes. That's normal. But recurring defensiveness can reveal where someone's emotional pressure points are. You ask a simple question, and they respond with an accusation. You mention a behavior, and suddenly you're discussing all the things you've supposedly done wrong. You ask for clarification, and they act as though you've attacked them. Again, defensiveness doesn't prove guilt. Sometimes people become defensive because they feel misunderstood. But if certain subjects repeatedly produce intense reactions, pay attention. The important clue isn't necessarily what they're hiding, it might simply be what they find difficult to discuss. And that distinction matters. Reading people isn't about catching them, it's about understanding them. 8. Watch their relationship with attention. Some people constantly need attention. Others avoid it. Neither automatically tells you whether someone is healthy or unhealthy. But the way a person responds to attention can reveal interesting things. Does praise make them uncomfortable? Do they constantly redirect conversations toward themselves? Do they become irritated when someone else receives recognition? Do they need to be the most interesting person in the room? Or are they perfectly comfortable letting someone else have the spotlight? One particularly interesting clue is what happens when attention moves away from them. Some people remain relaxed, others suddenly become louder. They interrupt. They change the subject. They make jokes. They criticize the person receiving attention. Again, don't diagnose someone from one moment, but repeated reactions can tell you something about their relationship with status, recognition, and validation. 9. Notice whether they can admit they're wrong. This is one of the most underrated psychological clues. Watch what happens when someone makes a mistake. Do they say, "You're right, I got that wrong"? Or do they immediately search for someone else to blame? Maybe the weather, their coworker, their partner, their childhood, the situation, anyone except themselves. Healthy self-esteem doesn't require perfection. In fact, psychologically secure people can usually tolerate being wrong. They don't need every mistake to become a threat to their identity. They can say, "I messed up. I misunderstood. I shouldn't have done that," and then move forward. That's not weakness, it's psychological flexibility, because if someone cannot tolerate being wrong, they may spend enormous amounts of energy protecting an image instead of solving the actual problem. 10. Look for patterns, not predictions. Now here's the most important rule. Don't turn psychology into fortune telling. You see someone cross their arms. That doesn't mean they're defensive. Someone avoids eye contact. That doesn't automatically mean they're lying. Someone talks quickly. That doesn't mean they're nervous. Human behavior is far too complicated for that. Instead, collect information. Look at context. Learn the person's baseline. Compare words with actions. Watch behavior across time. And most importantly, look for clusters of consistent behavior. One clue is weak. 5 consistent patterns are much more meaningful. This is how you move from guessing to actually understanding. But there's one more thing you need to understand. The better you become at reading people, the more careful you need to become about your own assumptions. Because your brain doesn't simply observe reality. It interprets it, and sometimes it sees what it expects to see. If you already believe someone is arrogant, you'll notice their arrogance. If you believe someone dislikes you, you'll notice every small sign that confirms it. This is called confirmation bias, and it can make you extremely confident about something that isn't actually true. That's why the best people readers aren't necessarily the people who make the fastest judgments. They're often the people who can say, "I noticed something, but I don't know what it means yet." That sentence represents psychological maturity. You observe, you stay curious, you gather more information, and you allow yourself to change your mind. Final thought. You don't need to become suspicious of everyone. You don't need to analyze every movement. And you certainly don't need to walk into every conversation thinking you're surrounded by hidden motives. The real skill is much simpler. Pay attention. Listen to what people say. Watch what they repeatedly do. Notice how they behave when they don't get what they want. Notice how they treat people who can't benefit them. Notice whether their actions match their words. And notice how they respond when you disagree. Because people are constantly communicating, not just through words, but through patterns. And once you learn to recognize those patterns, you may discover something surprising. Reading people isn't really about becoming better at judging them. It's about becoming better at understanding them. And perhaps even more importantly, understanding yourself. Because the more clearly you see other people, the easier it becomes to recognize who deserves your trust, who deserves your distance, and who simply deserves to be understood. People rarely reveal themselves in one dramatic moment. They reveal themselves slowly through the things they repeatedly do. And sometimes you don't need to read someone's mind. You just need to pay attention.